April 1945. North Sea coast of Norway. Night. The execution squad fired 3 short bursts. The sound cracked against the concrete walls of the submarine pen and vanished into the black water. The body of Matrosengefreiter Otto Kreuger jerked once, then slumped against the bullet-scarred post. A white cloth slipped from his fingers and fell into the mud. Kapitänleutnant Werner Hartmann did not flinch. He stood 10 meters away, hands behind his back, cap low over his eyes. The cold wind from the sea cut through his coat. The smell of cordite, mixed with diesel fumes and rotting kelp. The base commander, Kapitän Reinhardt, lowered his pistol. Refusal to obey orders in wartime. Attempted incitement to mutiny. Sentence carried out. His voice was flat, tired. He turned to Hartmann. "You see what happens when discipline breaks, Kapitänleutnant. Remember that when you are at sea?" Hartmann's jaw tightened. "Permission to remove the body, Herr Capet?" "Let the crew see him at dawn." Reinhardt lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "They need to understand there is no way out now. Only forward." Reinhardt walked away, boots echoing on the wet concrete. 2 guards remained, their faces pale in the dim yellow light. One of them, barely older than Kreuger, stared at the corpse like he might be sick. Hartmann stepped closer. Kreuger's eyes were open, glassy, turned toward the black entrance of the pen, where the sea lapped slowly against the walls. The young sailor had been 20, drafted from a factory outside Hamburg. He had refused to board U-977 that afternoon. "I will not die for a dead man in Berlin," Kreuger had said, in front of half the crew. "The war is over. Only fools go back to sea." 2 hours later, he stood in front of the post. Hartmann knelt and closed the dead man's eyes with his fingertips. The skin was still warm. "Your family will be told you died a hero," he murmured. "It is the only kindness I can give you." He straightened, looked once more at the body, then turned toward the submarine pen. Inside, under the reinforced concrete roof, U-977 waited in her berth. Her gray hull floated low in the oily water, streaked with rust, patched from past damage. Lights glowed faintly on the pier, reflecting off wet metal. The war was in its last spasms, but here everything still moved, as if the Reich would exist forever. Men shouted, crates banged, fuel lines hissed. Somewhere, a gramophone played a scratchy waltz for no one in particular. Hartmann walked along the narrow pier toward his boat. Chief Engineer Klaus Becker met him halfway, clipboard under his arm, coat stained with oil. Becker's face was lined and hard, eyes red from lack of sleep. "They shot him," Becker said quietly, without greeting. "Yes," Hartmann replied. "For refusing to board." "Yes." Becker stared at Hartmann, like he was trying to read something behind his eyes. "And you let them?" Hartmann's voice stayed calm. "I am not in command here on land." "You are in command of 51 men who just watched one of their own executed for saying what they are all thinking." Hartmann glanced toward the open bay, where the body still hung against the post. A pair of sailors had stopped, pretending to check a cable, while their eyes fixed on the dark shape. "They will be thinking about it when they are at depth charge range," Hartmann said. "Fear keeps them alive as much as discipline." "Fear also makes men stupid," Becker muttered. "And desperate." Hartmann ignored the comment. "Is the boat ready?" "The starboard diesel is working again. The coupling will last." "Maybe. We have food for 60 days if we count every potato twice and throw nothing away. Batteries are at 60% of original capacity. The hull is tired, Captain." like the rest of us. Are we ready? Becker hesitated. Then he nodded once. We are ready. They walked together toward the gangway. As they approached, the murmur of conversation on deck died. Men straightened, some instinctively reaching for caps they were not wearing. Nobody saluted. Formal regulations had drowned somewhere in the Atlantic long ago. Hartman stopped at the foot of the gangway and looked at his crew. Faces turned toward him in the dim light. Some young, some old, some hardened, some already half gone behind their eyes. They had all seen too much. They were all still about to see more. "Where is Lieutenant Emmler?" Hartman asked. "Here, Herr Kalou." Lieutenant Zurzay. Eric Emmler appeared at the conning tower hatch, almost stumbling in his hurry to get down. He was 23, clean-shaven, uniform still neat despite the chaos around him. His eyes burned with a kind of sharp, brittle energy that made Hartman uneasy. "Bridge now," Hartman said. They went aboard and climbed into the conning tower. From there, the submarine pen stretched out in both directions, cavernous and dark. The sea beyond was a black slit between concrete teeth. Outside that slit waited British destroyers, aircraft, and a collapsing empire. Emmler pulled a folded leaflet from his pocket and thrust it toward Hartman. "These were dropped this morning, sir, over the harbor." The paper was thin, cheap, printed in English and German. On one side, a crude map of Europe. Front lines marked in thick black arrows. Red circles around Berlin and Hamburg. "Surrender now," it said in clumsy German. "The war is lost. Save your life." On the other side, a photo. A burned city. A dead child in the foreground. Hartman's jaw clenched for a fraction of a second. Then his face returned to its usual controlled stillness. "Propaganda," he said. "It is not propaganda, sir," Miller said, voice low but intense. "The BBC reports Berlin is surrounded. Hamburg is gone. The men hear the radio in secret. They know." "They know what command tells them," Hartman replied. "Nothing more." Emmler's fingers tightened on the leaflet. "Carriger knew more. Now he is bleeding against a wall." Hartman took the leaflet slowly, folded it twice, and slid it into his coat. "You will not mention that name on this boat again, Lieutenant." "With respect, Herr Kalou, that is impossible. Every man on this crew knew him. They watched him die because he said out loud what they whisper at night." Hartman stepped closer to Emmler, close enough that their faces were only inches apart in the cramped tower. "Do you intend to join him, Lieutenant? Is that what you want?" Miller swallowed, throat moving. He held Hartman's gaze. "What I want, sir, is to know why we are still going to sea. For what? For whom? Berlin is burning. The fleet is finished. We are not sailing toward victory. We are sailing toward a grave." "Careful," Becker murmured behind them. Hartman did not raise his voice. "We sail because we have orders. That is enough." "No, Herr Kalou," Miller said, louder now. "It was enough when there was a chance, when there was a reason. Now we are being sent out like garbage to sink quietly, so someone in a bunker can pretend the war is still going." The tower felt smaller. The hum of distant generators pressed against the steel walls. "You are an officer of the Kriegsmarine," Hartman said. "You will control your tongue, or you will join Carriger by that post. Right now, this moment. Do you understand me?" For a heartbeat, nobody moved. If Emmler said one more wrong word, this night would end with another burst of gunfire. Then Emmler's shoulders sagged. He looked down. "Yes, Herr Kalou." "Say it properly." I understand my duty, Herr Kapitänleutnant, Miller said, voice low. I will obey orders. Hartman held his gaze 1 second longer, then stepped back. Good. Then listen carefully. We received sealed orders. Becker looked up sharply. He had not heard this part. We are to sail at dawn, Hartman continued. Course south, through the North Atlantic, then further south than any of you have ever been. Our objective lies in the South Atlantic, south of Ascension Island. A pause. Becker frowned. That far, with these batteries. We will be praying to every saint we can name by the time we get past Biscay. What is the mission, sir? Miller asked. Convoy attack? No convoy, Hartman said. He felt the weight of the paper in his breast pocket, like a stone. We are to attempt rendezvous with a supply ship. Failing that, we proceed to the coast of Argentina and request asylum from the government there. The words hung in the air. Not a man spoke. Argentina, Becker repeated slowly. You mean we are running away? We are following orders, Hartman said. That is not an attack patrol, Miller said. That is escape. That is what men do when they know the war is lost. On the pier below, someone shouted for a cable to be moved. A crate crashed. A curse echoed off the concrete. In the tower, the silence turned heavier. These orders are signed by Grover Admiral Dietnitz himself, Hartman said. This is not surrender. This is relocation of assets. Our presence in Argentina will serve the Reich's future interests. Even he heard how hollow that sounded. Becker's lip twitched. Mahler stared at him like he was listening to a ghost. Future interests of what, Captain? Becker asked quietly. A navy without ships? A Reich without cities? Hartman looked past them, toward the black shape hanging at the edge of the light. Gear's body. The wind tugged at the dead man's jacket. For a moment, it almost looked like he was trying to stand up again. If the war ends while we are at sea, Miller said, voice suddenly hoarse, what then? We arrive in Argentina as what? Refugees? War criminals? Prisoners? Alive, Hartman said. We arrive alive. That is all that matters now. So we are not dying for the Reich anymore, Becker said. We are dying for the chance to sit in a foreign cafe and pretend we do not hear the language around us. You are not dying at all if I can prevent it, Hartman snapped. It was the first crack in his controlled tone. You think I want this patrol? You think I want to take this boat, in this condition, through seas full of enemy aircraft, with half the world listening for us? I do not, but I will, because the only alternative they gave us tonight is nailed to that post. Silence. Heavy. Real. Emmler's eyes glistened, though no tears fell. The men saw him cling to that cloth, Captain. The white one. Hartman frowned. What cloth? The one in his hand when they tied him. A white scrap of shirt. He said it was a flag. He told the guards he wanted to hold it. Hartman remembered the white cloth slipping from Kuorger's fingers into the mud after the bullets hit. At the time, he had dismissed it as some pointless, sentimental gesture. Now the image came back with a sharper edge. He said there is always another way than just walking to the slaughter, Emmler whispered. We laughed at him. We called him a coward. Then we watched him die. Becker spoke first. If any man on this boat talks like that, I will put a wrench through his teeth before the firing squad gets the chance. Hartman looked at both of them. Two different kinds of loyalty. Two different kinds of fear. No one will talk like that, he said, because no one will have time. We sail in 3 hours. There will be too much work, too little sleep, too many enemies, Anyone who wants to live will shut his mouth and do his job. He leaned over the tower rail and called down to the deck. All hands, listen up. His voice carried through the pen, stronger than he felt. At 0400 we cast off. This is not a standard patrol. We will be at sea longer than before. Conditions will be worse. Enemy patrols will be heavier. You will be tired. You will be scared. That is normal. You will still do your jobs. Dozens of faces turned up toward him. You have heard rumors, he continued, about Berlin, about Hamburg, about surrender. You will forget them. Whatever happens on land, our war is not over until you step off this boat or this boat goes to the bottom. On this vessel there is no surrender. There is only survival. He did not mention Argentina. Not yet. Not tonight. He could feel Becker's stare between his shoulder blades and Emmerler's silence like a weight. Check your stations, Hartmann said. Check your equipment. If anything fails out there, you die. If any man fails another, you all die. That is the only truth that matters now. The men moved. Orders snapped through the air. Cables were coiled. Hatches opened and closed. Life returned to the steel shell of U-977. But it was jittery, charged, brittle. Hartmann climbed down into the control room. The familiar smells hit him at once. Diesel, metal, sweat, old bread, electric insulation. The smell of another life he had once believed meant honor and purpose. He made a full inspection from bow to stern. In the forward torpedo room, the weapons lay in their racks, dull metal waiting for commands that might never come. In the bunks, photographs of wives and girlfriends were pinned above narrow mattresses. In the galley, the cook argued with a junior sailor about how many onions could be hidden in a soup before anyone noticed they were gone. Normal details, normal sounds, wrapped around a single, abnormal truth. They were not going out to fight. They were going out to run. Back in his tiny cabin, Hartmann shut the door and sat at the small fold-down desk. He pulled the sealed orders from his pocket and unfolded them again. The ink looked darker now. The signature at the bottom more like a smear than a name. Proceed to designated grid in South Atlantic. Attempt rendezvous. Failing that, seek asylum in Argentine waters. Under no circumstances surrender vessel to enemy forces. Under no circumstances surrender. Outside, a distant roll of thunder echoed over the sea. Or maybe it was artillery, far away, across a continent that was tearing itself apart. It did not matter. Out there, only the sonar pings and depth charges would matter. Hartmann reached into the drawer and took out a small photograph. Anna and Sophie standing in a park in Kiel. Sophie in a summer dress, hair in braids, holding a wooden toy boat. 3 years old in the picture, 7 now, somewhere under a sky full of bombers. You will not grow up with a father shot against a wall, he whispered. You will not grow up hearing people spit when they say our name. His hand closed into a fist around the photo. If there is a way through this, I will find it. He did not know yet what through meant. Loyalty, desertion, survival. All of them blurred together in the cramped cabin. He only knew that every choice now had teeth. Every decision could kill 51 men. At 0330 the alarm bell sounded through the boat. Men scrambled to their stations. Boots thudded on steel. Voices called out final checks. In the control room, Becker reported, all compartments ready, ballast tanks at harbor trim, diesels standing by. At the periscope stand, Muller avoided Hartmann's eyes, but his voice was steady as he repeated depth orders and bearings to the helmsman. Whatever he thought, he was still doing his job. For now. On the pier, lines creaked and tightened. "Cast off forward," Hartman ordered. "Cast off forward, aye. Cast off aft. Cast off aft, aye." Outside the pen, the sea was black and restless. U-977 eased away from the wall, engines rumbling low. The massive concrete roof receded above them, replaced by the open, starless sky. Hartman stepped onto the bridge as they cleared the mouth of the pen. Cold air knifed across his face. He could feel the eyes of his men on his back, waiting for one word, one sign that this was madness or salvation. "Course 180, he said. Ahead, slow." The bow turned south, toward Biscay, toward the Atlantic, toward a rendezvous that might be a ghost. Behind them, in the submarine pen, the body of Otto Krager still hung against the bullet-marked post, swaying gently in the wind. The white cloth in the mud soaked slowly with rain and blood, turning gray. On U-977, no one spoke his name. The war for most of Europe was almost finished. Cities were falling, flags were changing, millions were waiting for the last shots to stop. For the men sealed inside the steel hull, now sliding into deeper water, everything was just beginning. The same ocean, another world. South Atlantic, off Ascension Island. A gray dawn pressed against low clouds, turning the sky into a dirty sheet of metal. The sea below rolled in long, heavy swells, the kind that lulled men into boredom and then killed them when they forgot to be afraid. The PBY Catalina looked almost fragile against that expanse of water and sky. Its broad wings stretched out like tired arms, the twin engines droning a steady note that seeped into the bones of everyone on board. The Americans called it a flying boat. The Germans called it the eye that never slept. Inside the cockpit, Lieutenant Jack Thompson rubbed the bridge of his nose with a gloved hand and blinked against the dull ache behind his eyes. 12 hours of patrol the day before. 8 hours of restless sleep. Now hour 5 of another endless sweep. The war might be winding down in Europe, but nobody had told the South Atlantic. Out here, everything still looked exactly like it had for years. Empty. "How many more grids?" he asked, not looking away from the instruments. In the right seat, co-pilot Ed Ramirez flipped through the clipboard, pencil between his teeth. "2 more legs on this pattern, then we turn back. If weather holds. Which it will not, because I said it out loud." Thompson managed half a smile. "You keep talking like that, Ed. I am throwing you out a blister window." "Then you have to fly this bathtub alone, sir." "Bathtub flies better than you." "Bathtub is smarter than you." The exchange was automatic, worn smooth by repetition. Jokes were a shield. Without them, all that remained was the sound of the engines and the weight of the ocean below. Behind them, in the waist section, 19-year-old gunner Billy Harris pressed his forehead against the cold plexiglass of the blister window and stared down at the sea. This was his first real patrol. The training films had shown U-boats everywhere, sleek gray shapes caught in searchlights, exploding in white fountains of water under perfect textbook drops. Reality so far was different. Nothing but waves. Waves and an endless horizon that made his stomach twist if he looked at it too long. He shifted his M3 submachine gun, feeling slightly ridiculous. What was he going to do, he thought? Shoot a submarine to death if it surfaced angry. The twin 50 cals were his real teeth, but right now they sat calm and useless, barrels pointed at nothing. In the small radio compartment, Petty Officer Tom Green tuned between frequencies with the careful hands of a safecracker. Static hissed, crackled, rose and fell like a ghost tide. Occasionally, a fragment of voice broke through, usually weather reports, sometimes music distorted beyond recognition. He scribbled down figures and times, then leaned toward the cockpit. "Still nothing, Jack. If there is a wolf pack out here, they are being real thoughtful about radio discipline." "There is no wolf pack," Thompson said. "Just some admiral in Washington who does not want his budget cut before the ink is dry on the surrender papers." Green cracked a dry grin. "So we are flying 800 miles round trip to protect his desk." "Welcome to the war, Tom." Green leaned back. For a moment, the ghost of a memory flashed in his head. A boy in Illinois, listening to baseball on the radio, summer air coming through the window. That world felt like something he had dreamed years ago. In the navigator's position, Ensign Collins traced a line on the chart. "We are here. If the Krauts are still running their blockade runners and stragglers up this way, this is the funnel. No land, no cover, just us and them." "And so far," Ramirez said, "minus them." Thompson glanced at the small photo taped beside his altimeter. A young woman with dark hair, holding a dog that looked too big for her arms. Sarah. Smiling like the world behind the photographer was not on fire. 5 years of flying. Dozens of patrols. One confirmed submarine kill. Even that had felt different than the training film promised. No cheering on the intercom, just a white geyser of water, an oil slick, and 2 hours of circling the debris field looking for survivors they were not allowed to land and pick up. Command had called it a victory. Thompson had called it a chore that smelled like fuel and burned insulation. But there was another truth he never said out loud. After years of searching empty water, that one day when something had actually been there, had crackled with a kind of terrifying clarity. Finally, the enemy existed. Finally, the ocean gave up one of its ghosts. Now, over the South Atlantic, he wondered if he would ever feel that again. Or if the war would end with him staring at empty sea, listening to a piece he could not yet hear on the radio. "Contact!" Billy's shout from the blister snapped through the hull like a gunshot. Every man in the Catalina froze for a fraction of a second. Then the plane came alive. "What have you got?" Thompson barked, already banking the aircraft toward the right. Blister glass shook as Billy leaned forward, knuckles white around the grip. "Bearing 080, maybe 6-7 miles. Something on the surface. Not a ship. Too low. Looks like, I think it is a conning tower." Ramirez was already unbuckling. "On it." He scrambled back to the blister, slid in behind Billy, and squinted through the binoculars. The Catalina dipped slightly as Thompson kept the bank smooth, trading altitude for speed. "Talk to me, Ed," Thompson said, voice steady, heart rate suddenly not. Ramirez adjusted the focus. The world in the lens sharpened. Gray swells, white caps, and then, cutting across them, a darker line. A hull, low in the water. A small tower breaking the surface. "It is a U-boat," Ramirez said. "German, no question. Maybe 7-8 miles. Heading, call it south-southwest. Slow. She is surfaced." The cabin seemed to constrict around the words. U-boat. After hundreds of hours of empty water, the enemy was suddenly real again. Green shoved his headset on properly. "Say again? You are sure?" "Sure enough. I will bet your pay on it," Ramirez said. Collins's pencil flew across the chart. "If she is heading south at that speed, and we are here, She probably thinks she is clear of the worst patrol sectors. Sloppy or tired. Or desperate, Green added. Thompson's first instinct was pure muscle memory. Arm the depth charges. Get me a running course, Ed. We will come in from the sun if it ever shows its face today. Silence. Then Ramirez's voice, not sarcastic for once. Jack, you remember yesterday? Thompson swore under his breath. The last patrol, the false contact, the whitecaps that had looked like a periscope wake until they were on top of them. 4 depth charges dropped on empty sea. 4 little plumes of wasted explosive. 4 marks on the ordnance log with red faces attached. They had not had time to rearm before being sent back out. Too many planes, not enough bombs, not enough belief left that any of this mattered. Tom, Thompson said, even though he knew the answer. Inventory. Green flipped open the panel, eyes scanning. For a second he considered lying, then discarded the idea. The empty hooks would betray him. No depth charges, no bombs, full fuel, full ammo for the guns. That is it. The Catalina flew heavier in that moment, though nothing had changed. A hunter, without claws. A patrol plane reduced to a pair of eyes and an empty threat. Billy's voice came again, sharp. She is starting to turn, sir. I think they have seen us. Of course they have seen us, Ramirez muttered. We are a flying barn with engines. Thompson stared ahead, through the forward glass. Far on the horizon, a pinprick of darker gray moved against the water. The subtle change of direction was there, if you knew what to look for. He had no bombs, no charges, no teeth. But the men on that submarine did not know that. In the space between 2 heartbeats, an idea clicked into place. It was stupid. It was thin. It was miles from any doctrine or manual. It was also all he had. Ed, he said quietly, get back in the right seat. Ramirez slid into place. What are you thinking? We have guns. We have a big ugly airplane. We have altitude. And we have the advantage of them not knowing we are flying empty. You want to scare them into submission? I want them to believe they are already dead, Thompson said. Then I want to see what they do with that belief. Ramirez stared at him. The engines droned. The ocean rolled. Somewhere far below, a captain on a German submarine was looking up at a speck in the sky and making his own calculations. Jack, Green said from the radio compartment, if that U-boat dives, it is gone. We cannot touch it. You know that. I know. And if we buzz them, we tell them exactly where we are. If they have a flak gun manned, they could tear us up on the first pass. You know that too. I know that too. So what is the plan? Thompson exhaled slowly. The pressure of the headset cups against his ears, the smell of oil and sweat, the taste of stale coffee at the back of his mouth. Every sense suddenly sharpened. We treat this like a live attack run, he said. Collins, I want an approach vector that brings us in fast and low, just like the manual says. Billy, you stay on those blisters and call out every move they make. If they man the gun, you put fire on that deck the second you can see faces. Ed, you and I will fly it like we are loaded to the wings. And when we get there, Ramirez asked. Then we act like we are about to drop everything we have, Thompson said. Gear down last moment, flaps as needed, full aggression, no hesitation. If I were them, I would assume we never fly out here empty. They are tired, they are hunted, they are deep in our patrol zone. We use all that. Green's voice was flat. And if they call our bluff? Thompson did not answer right away. He watched the distance shrink, the speck ahead growing slowly, painfully slowly, into something that looked more like a boat than a mark on his windshield. "If they call the bluff," he said finally, "we climb, we run, and we report contact, and hope someone with real teeth is close enough to matter." "And if nobody is?" "Then a German submarine reaches wherever it thinks it is going," Thompson said. "And a few more sailors drown someone else on some other convoy. And we go home and explain to some colonel why we let it go." The plane vibrated slightly as he nudged the throttles forward. The engines answered with a deeper note. "I am done watching them slip away," he added, quieter. There was more than professional stubbornness under that sentence. He was thinking of the oil slick, of the debris, of the one survivor they had watched through binoculars until distance swallowed him. Command had their kill tally. Thompson had a face he could not forget. "All right," Ramirez said. "Let us go bluff a U-boat then." "Billy," Thompson called, "eyes on that deck. What are they doing?" Billy squinted until his eyes hurt. The U-boat was bigger now, details resolving slowly through the haze. "I see movement. Men on the bridge. 1, 2, maybe 4 on the tower. Something at the aft deck. Hard to tell. No flashes yet. No gunfire." Green turned back to his radio, fingers already moving. "I am sending contact report to Ascension. Grid and bearing. If we do not make it back, I want someone to know there is a shark in this bathtub." "Make it short and sweet," Thompson said. "We may need the channel clear." In his mind, Thompson could almost see the other side of this tableau. A German captain pulled from sleep or fatigue, rushing to the bridge, binoculars up, squinting at a dot in the sky that grew more dangerous with every second. Maybe they were laughing, thinking the war was almost over, that no American would bother with this stretch of empty ocean anymore. Maybe they were terrified. Maybe they were like his own men, exhausted, running on fumes, caught between orders that made no sense and a sea that did not care. "Altitude 600, Collins called. "Closing fast. If you are going to do something dramatic, Lieutenant, now is the time." Thompson pushed the nose down just a hair more. The horizon tilted. The Catalina surged forward, engines straining as if they too understood that something real was finally happening. For the first time in months, the patrol did not feel routine. It felt like a knife edge. One side, nothing. The other side, history. He kept his voice level. "All stations ready. We are going in as if fully loaded. Make them believe it." Nobody asked what happened after that. The U-boat ahead grew larger, the gray of its hull separating from the gray of the sea. On its conning tower, tiny shapes turned skyward. On its decks, men ran for stations. Somewhere inside that steel tube, a decision was forming. Dive or fight? Run or surrender? The Catalina roared toward them, empty bomb racks hidden beneath the wings, guns loaded, hearts pounding. 2 hunters. 1 ocean. And only one of them knew that this was all, for the moment, an elaborate bluff. The South Atlantic boiled under the Catalina's nose. Wind clawed at the hull, spray burst into white ghosts below, and the German submarine grew from a gray line into a solid, steel fact. Lieutenant Jack Thompson held the yoke in a grip that walked the edge between control and choke. Every instinct he had drilled into himself over years of patrol said the same thing. Fly the profile, trust the instruments, stay predictable. Every other instinct, the animal one, wanted to pull up and get as far away from that rising column of steel as possible. "Altitude 400, Ensign Collins called, voice tight. "Speed holding. On running line." "Billy, talk to me," Thompson said. In the blister, Billy Harris had forgotten to blink. His eyes burned, but he could not look away. The U-boat's deck was clear now, the conning tower sharp. "I got 5, maybe 6 on the bridge. 1 with binoculars. They are looking right at us. Aft deck, I see movement around the gun mount. Looks like they are trying to man the flak." Ramirez swore under his breath. "Of course they are. Why just die when you can shoot at us first?" Thompson angled the Catalina a few degrees off-center. Not enough to break the illusion of an attack run. Just enough to complicate the aim of anyone pointing a cannon at his face. The engines roared, their vibration turning from background noise into a physical thing crawling through metal and bone. "Tom, you got that contact report out?" "In the air and act," Green replied. "Ascension confirms receipt. They say, and I quote, 'Do not engage recklessly.'" Billy let out a short, disbelieving laugh. Too late for that memo. On U-977, Captain Lieutenant Werner Hartmann felt the deck tilt slightly under his boots as the bow cut across the swell. The bow wave parted white around the hull. Above, the alien shape of the American flying boat screamed closer, its wings casting a growing shadow across the water. He did not need binoculars. He could see the threat with his own eyes. The swollen belly under the wings that usually carried bombs, the open blisters with guns mounted, the purposeful angle of the approach. "Flak crew, to your stations," Lieutenant Emler shouted from behind him on the tower. "Move, damn you!" Men pounded across the wet deck toward the aft gun. The spray made everything slick. One sailor slipped, went to a knee, then forced himself up again. The boat felt suddenly very small, very exposed, like a beetle on the surface of a giant drum. "Captain, should we dive?" Oberleutnant Schneider yelled up from the tower hatch. His hair was plastered to his forehead with sweat and salt. "If that plane drops now, we will not be down in time." Hartmann's mind raced. The dive alarm was one shout away. One order, and the bow would tilt down, ballast tanks would flood, and steel would slip beneath the waves to where aircraft claws could not reach. That was reflex. That was doctrine. But the starboard ballast valve was still sluggish. Becker had reported it that morning, with the weary tone of a man running out of ways to patch a dying machine. They could dive, yes. But if anything jammed, if they took even a near miss with the wrong angle, they would go down and not come back up. "The flak gun is manned," Billy shouted. "They are swinging it toward us." On the Catalina's flight deck, the world narrowed. Thompson no longer saw the ocean, the clouds, the horizon. He saw only the dagger-thin line of the U-boat's deck and the men on it, tiny, racing figures. "You see bombs on us. They see bombs on us," Ramirez said through clenched teeth. "We are ghosts with claws as far as they know." "Billy," Thompson said, "the second that gun flashes, you light them up. Keep them ducking." "Yes, sir." Billy's finger hovered over the trigger. He had never fired in anger at a human being before. Targets, yes. Silhouette cutouts, sure. This was different. These were men. Wet, cold, real. He pushed the thought away and felt for the switch that armed his turret. The Catalina shuddered in the wind. On U-977's aft deck, Matrosenobergefreiter Hans Vogel yanked the cover off the 20mm cannon with fingers gone clumsy from cold. The metal burned his palms anyway. He swung the gun on its mount, cursing the stiffness of the mechanism. "Their angle is changing," one of the younger sailors shouted, eyes wide as he stared at the growing monster in the sky. "They are coming straight at us." "No," Vogel snapped, even though panic licked at his chest, too. "They are coming for the kill. Get the magazine on. Now." On the tower, Mellor leaned over the rail. "Captain, we have seconds. We must decide." Hartman's grip tightened on the cold iron of the periscope column. The roar of the Catalina's engines grew to a physical blow, buffeting the air. He could see the pilots now. Two tiny helmeted shapes behind the glass. In that instant, he knew something the men around him did not. Hartman had studied American doctrine. He knew how they preferred to attack, from which angles, at what heights. He watched the plane's nose, its glide slope, the speed of its descent. He saw, like a diver reading a current, that this approach was textbook, aggressive, confident, no hesitations, no weaving, no uncertainty. They are loaded, he thought. They would not come in like that if they were empty. He flew a hand through the air, slicing an invisible line. "Hold dive order," he said, his own voice sounding foreign to him. "If we are still on the surface when the bombs fall, we are dead. If we are half under, we get broken in half. The only chance is to make them late or make them miss." "And how do we do that?" Schneider demanded. Hartman watched the flying boat swell in his vision. "We convince them we are not worth finishing, or we do not convince them at all, and this is the last sunrise any of us see." Schneider stared at him as if he had gone mad. Around them, the crew scrambled like ants across the hull. The gun clanged into place. The sea rolled, the sky roared. "Open fire!" Muller shouted down to the aft deck, voice cracking. "Open fire!" Hartman echoed, because doing nothing was worse than doing the wrong thing. Vogel braced himself, pulled the trigger. The 20mm slammed to life, ripping orange fire into the air. Shells streaked up in savage arcs toward the incoming shape, white tracers sketching frantic lines between sea and sky. The recoil hammered his shoulder. The gun mount shrieked under the stress. In the Catalina, tracer lines suddenly appeared in front of the nose, bright and lethal. "Flak!" Collins yelled. "They are shooting at us!" "Everybody hang on," Thompson said calmly, though his heart was trying to punch out of his chest. He kicked the rudder, shifted their path by a hair. The flak streaks went just off the left wingtip, close enough that the men in the blister instinctively ducked. "Return fire!" Thompson barked. Billy squeezed his trigger. The twin .50 calibers in the blister roared, the plane shuddering with the recoil. Spent casings clattered across the deck. Lines of heavy rounds reached down toward the dark, wet deck of the U-boat. He saw tiny figures scattering, diving for cover. He did not see if he hit anyone. He was not sure he wanted to. Ramirez leaned forward. "Jack, if you want this to work, we cannot flinch. They need to look up and see the angel of death coming, not some nervous pilot second-guessing." "Then let us be angels," Thompson muttered. He rolled the Catalina just enough to suggest a lined-up drop. In his mind, he walked through the motions he had burned into himself over years. Check speed. Check altitude. Lines. Release. Pull up. Except this time, there would be no release. "Billy, keep the fire on that gun." "Doing my best." Billy's shoulders burned, his fingers numb on the trigger. The smell of cordite flooded the blister. Through the haze and vibration, he saw the German gun jerk, then go briefly silent as one of the crew slumped against the shield. Another man dragged him aside and took his place. "Still firing," he panted. "They are not stopping." On U-977, Vogel hissed, as a hot shard of metal ripped across his sleeve, cutting through cloth and skin alike. Blood soaked his cuff. He bit back a cry and kept firing. "Keep their heads down!" Mellor shouted, half to him, half to himself. The Catalina was almost on top of them now, engines a deafening thunder, the black pits of its bomb bay doors. "Doors are closed," Schneider rasped suddenly. "Captain, the bomb bay doors are closed." Hartman snapped his attention to the gray belly overhead. Schneider was right. The metal panels under the wings were sealed tight. No open claws, no shadows of hanging weapons. "Maybe they open at the last second," Emmler shot back. "Maybe that is their tactic now." "It is not," Hartman said automatically. Training spoke before caution could. They open earlier, always. The thought hit like ice water. If they were following attack doctrine but not opening their claws, what did that mean? They are empty. For a heartbeat, a wild, completely insane idea flashed across his mind. They are bluffing. He almost laughed at the absurdity. Why would an American risk his plane on a game of nerves? Why come in like this with nothing to throw? It made no sense. Except war made no sense anymore. Berlin was burning, and he was sailing to Argentina because a man in a bunker had signed a piece of paper. A boy had been shot last night for talking about a white flag. Sense had drowned months ago. The Catalina screamed closer, dropping to barely above mast height. The men on the tower ducked instinctively as shadow swallowed them. Vogel's cannon finally fell silent, barrel glowing faintly. He covered his head with his arms as the flying boat passed. In the cockpit, Thompson's knuckles turned white. The tower filled his windshield for a split second. He could see faces, pale, tense, some twisted in fear, some in pure, stubborn rage. "Hold," he whispered, to himself, to the plane, to the lie he was selling. "Hold. Believe it." He yanked the yoke back at the last possible second. The Catalina leaped, engines howling. Its belly cleared the periscope shears by meters, maybe less. Spray slapped the hull. For those on the U-boat, it felt like the shadow of a guillotine passing inches above their necks. Every man on U-977 braced for the impact, for the tearing blast of bombs, the ocean lifting, the world turning white, and then crushing black. It did not come. The plane roared overhead and kept going. No geysers, no explosions, just the trail of sound and the smell of exhaust, slowly thinning. Silence crashed down like a second shockwave. "They missed," someone gasped. "No," Muller shouted, voice wild. "They will come around. Prepare to dive." "Captain," Schneider grabbed the railing so hard his knuckles went white. "You saw the doors." Hartman did not answer. Not yet. His mind ran faster than his pulse. If he ordered a dive now, and the ballast valves stuck, and the plane came back with real bombs on a second pass, then this would all end in twisted metal and drowning hands on his shoulders. He looked past the wake of the Catalina, at the sky beyond. If this was a bluff, it was a madman's gamble. If it was not a bluff, they were simply living on borrowed seconds. On the Catalina, Thompson threw them into a wide, banking turn. "We are coming around again," he said. "Billy, keep eyes on them. Ed, show me as much teeth as this old bathtub has." "You want a dive angle on second pass?" Ramirez asked. "Yes." "Make it seen." "I want that captain to feel every page of our ordnance manual flipping toward his execution." Billy pressed his helmet harder against his ears. "They are still on the surface, sir. No sign of a dive yet. Some of them are just standing there." "That will change," Green muttered. "Nobody stares at a rope forever." Eventually, they kicked the chair away, or stepped down. Range? Thompson asked. About a mile from the last pass opening, Collins said. We swing wide, then cut back. Textbook. Then let us give them a textbook to be afraid of. He pushed the nose down again, setting up the second run. The routine took over. Angle, speed, altitude. But beneath that, something else crept in. A tightness in his chest that was not fear, not exactly. Anticipation. A thrill as sharp and shameful as it was undeniable. After months of empty skies, he was in a duel. Not of guns and bombs, but of nerves. Of perception. Of who broke first. On U-977, the crew watched the Catalina turn, their necks craning. Captain, now we must dive, Emmeller said. They will not miss twice. Hartman looked down at the deck. Faces turned up to him, waiting. Some pleading, some defiant. He saw Becker near the aft hatch, one hand gripping the rail, the other on the emergency dive lever. Waiting for one word. He imagined the dive order, the klaxon, the rush of men tumbling down ladders, hatches slamming. He imagined the ballast problem turning from an engineering note into the last thing any of them heard. He imagined a near miss cracking the bow while they were still half on the surface. He also imagined another possibility, one that had seemed impossible until this very minute. They are bluffing. The thought refused to let go now. It dug in with all the stubbornness that had kept him alive through a dozen depth charge barrages. If the plane was empty, diving was suicide. On the surface, they at least had options. But there was something else, too. A shadow that looked vaguely like a young sailor's face and a scrap of white cloth. Krarger had said there was always another way. Hartman felt something crack, not in the hull, but inside his carefully maintained certainty. He heard Reinhardt's voice the night before, cold and tired. This is what happens when discipline breaks. He saw the bullets, the jerk of the body, the cloth falling. He also heard himself telling Becker, "We are following orders." He heard how thin it sounded now, with a foreign airplane bearing down and the Reich reduced to rumors in the ether. "Captain!" Muller shook his arm, eyes wild. "We are out of time." Hartman grabbed his wrist. "Look at me, Lieutenant." Muller did. The fear in his eyes was naked, but so was the hunger. The need for someone else to decide whether they lived or died. "What happens if we dive and the valves fail?" Hartman asked. Emmeller hesitated. We flood unevenly. We might broach. We might go down bow first. We might not come back up. What happens if we stay on the surface and they are loaded?" "They sink us," Muller said. "Cleanly. Quickly. And if we stay on the surface and they are empty?" Aller's mouth opened. Closed. "Why would they be empty?" "That is not an answer." "They would not fly this far on an empty patrol," Emmeller insisted, clinging to doctrine the way a drowning man clings to floating wood. "It would be pointless." "So is this war now," Hartman said quietly. He looked up at the Catalina lining up again, its nose aimed at his heart. Somewhere deep below his feet, in the tight steel corridors of U-977, 50 men waited in the dark for the orders that would decide what kind of death they received. Somewhere above, 5 men in a flying boat waited to see if their lie would hold. Hartman inhaled, tasted salt and oil, and something metallic that might have been blood in the back of his throat. "Schneider!" he shouted down the hatch. "Yes, Captain." "Sound diving alarm." Emmeller sagged with something like relief. Becker's hand tightened on the lever. "But do not flood tanks," Hartman added. "Not yet." Silence, then confused echoes. "Captain?" "Let them hear it," Hartman said, voice gaining a razor's edge. "Let the Americans hear the alarm. Let them think we are desperate. Let them think we are caught." The shrill wail of the klaxon ripped through the boat and across the deck. Men scrambled on reflex. Hatches banged. Shouts echoed as if the steel itself was panicking. On the Catalina, the wail reached them faintly through the roar of the engines. "They are diving!" Billy yelled. "Alarm is sounding!" "Then this is it," Thompson said. "We make them believe they will not reach depth in time." He lowered the Catalina further, until the spray from the waves below flecked the windows. Every nerve in his body screamed that this was too low, too fast, too reckless. He held the line anyway. On U-977, the crew huddled by hatches, waiting for the order to flood, waiting to feel the tilt. It did not come. Instead, over the scream of the alarm, a different sound cut through. A voice, raw and relentless. "White flag on deck," Hartman shouted. "Now! Anything white. Shirt, rag, blanket. Move." For a second, the men around him simply stared, as if they had misheard. "Move!" he roared. One of the sailors on the tower yanked his undershirt over his head so fast he nearly strangled himself. Another ripped the bedding from the rail. In seconds, a strip of white cloth was in Hartman's hand, whipping in the wind. Emaller looked at him like he had gone insane. "Captain, this is treason." "No," Hartman said. "This is survival." He leaned over the rail and waved the white cloth hard, high, making sure it flapped wide and clear. The past 24 hours collapsed into that motion. Carragher's eyes. The bullet impacts. The signed orders. Argentina on a map. Propaganda leaflets. Closed bomb bay doors. On the Catalina, Billy's voice cracked. "Sir, I think they're raising something." "What?" Thompson snapped. "I see white. On the tower. Waving." Ramirez pressed his face to the glass. For a second, spray distorted everything. Then the image sharpened. A figure on the conning tower, arm extended, cloth whipping. White, not gray, not a trick of light. "Jack," Ramirez breathed. "That is a flag." The Catalina hurtled toward them, empty bomb racks full of lies, guns loaded, hearts racing. Below, on U-977, a captain, who had watched a boy die for even speaking the word surrender, held a white scrap of cloth in his hand and dared the sky to call his bluff. For a moment, nobody in the Catalina spoke. The world narrowed to a strip of gray ocean, a steel hull, and that impossible flash of white on the conning tower. "Confirm that," Thompson said, the words dry in his throat. "Billy, what are you seeing?" Billy blinked hard, wiped salt from his eyes with the back of his hand, and leaned into the blister glass until his helmet bumped it. "It is a flag, sir. White flag. Someone on the tower is waving it side to side, clear as day." Ramirez craned his neck to see past the framing. Jesus, they are actually doing it. Green's voice cut in from the radio nook, disbelieving. "Since when do U-boats surrender to airplanes?" "Since today," Collins muttered. "Since right now." The Catalina hurtled forward, still on its deadly textbook trajectory. Thompson's hands moved before his conscious mind caught up. He eased back on the throttles, brought the nose up a fraction. The angle shifted from kill run to flyby. "Hold fire," he ordered. "Billy, do not shoot that tower unless they so much as twitch toward a gun." "Copy," Billy said, the word a little shaky. His fingers eased off the trigger, muscles trembling from the strain of not doing what training and fear both screamed at him to do. On U-977, the white cloth snapped and twisted in the wind, trying to tear itself free of Hartman's hand. His arm ached, but he kept it moving, wide arcs, No ambiguity. Below him on the deck, confusion churned like a second sea. What is he doing? Has he lost his mind? They are going to shoot us anyway. Quiet. Becker's voice cut through the panic like a wrench through metal. He stood by the aft hatch, one hand still on the emergency dive lever. His eyes were fixed on the captain, not the sky. You will stay at your stations unless ordered otherwise. You run now. You die tired. Emler grabbed the rail so hard his knuckles went bloodless. Captain, this is surrender. We were ordered under no circumstances. Under no circumstances, Hartman snapped back, without lowering the flag. Were we to surrender the vessel to enemy forces? I am surrendering lives. I am not giving them the boat, if I can help it. That is sophistry, Muller spat. Command will not see the difference, if they are still alive to see anything. They are not here, Hartman said. My men are. That is the difference that matters. The Catalina thundered over them again, this time higher, less intimate. The belly that had seemed an executioner's blade moments ago now felt like a judge's eye, circling. On the flight deck, Thompson guided the flying boat into a wide arc, keeping the U-boat in sight. His heartbeat had not slowed. It had only changed flavor, from attack adrenaline to something stranger, more brittle. A German submarine just surrendered to us, Green said slowly, as if testing each word for cracks. Mid-ocean. No ships around. No witnesses. Plenty of witnesses, Ramirez corrected. We have 5 up here, 50 down there, and one very surprised colonel waiting on ascension, who is going to choke on his coffee when he reads my report. Can we even accept a surrender from up here? Collins asked. What do we do? Drop them a sign-up sheet? Thompson took a breath, forced his voice into command mode. Doubt could wait. Procedure, even improvised, could not. First, we do not die to a last-second surprise, he said. We treat that boat as hostile until we are very sure it is not. Agreed, Ramirez said immediately. Billy, keep your guns trained. If anyone goes near that flak mount with anything that looks like a weapon, you shout. Aye, sir. Tom, raise ascension. Priority message. U-boat on surface, displaying white flag, appears to be surrendering. Request instructions and nearest surface asset. Green was already tuning. On it. Give me about 30 seconds to fight through the static and the bureaucrats. And Collins, Thompson went on, plot a holding pattern. I want us circling just outside comfortable gun range, but close enough that every man on that deck feels our eyes on him. He eased the Catalina into a wide, lazy-looking loop that was anything but relaxed. The engines droned. The U-boat stayed below, a dark shape pinned under an invisible thumb. Green's voice came back, more focused. Ascension reads us. They say hold contact, do not attempt landing or boarding, maintain visual intimidation. Their words, not mine. Nearest destroyer is a few hours out. They are retasking her. A few hours, Ramirez repeated. That is a long time to keep a bunch of scared men honest. Scared men do not scare me as much as angry ones, Thompson said. Keep that in mind. On U-977, the alarm had finally gone silent, leaving a too loud emptiness in its wake. Men hovered between actions, caught mid-reflex, half-buttoned jackets, half-coiled ropes, half-loaded magazines. Stand fast, Becker shouted. No one moves unless the captain orders it. At the tower, Emler was shaking. Whether from rage or fear, even he was not sure. You just signed all our death warrants, he hissed at Hartman. If command hears of this... Command is not here, Hartman snapped back. The Americans are. The sea is. That is all that counts right now. They will treat us as cowards. They will treat us as survivors, Hartman said. If any of this goes into a report, you can argue about heroism with whoever is left on land. Unless you would rather drown to prove a point. Emler opened his mouth, closed it. The argument he wanted to make would not put air in anybody's lungs. It would not stop bombs or bullets. It would not keep that white scrap of cloth from meaning what everyone knew it meant. Men are watching you, Becker called up, quieter now. All of them. If you tear that flag down, we will never get them back under control. Not after the boy at the post. The name Kier Asher Ger hung in the air unsaid, as if speaking it might call the firing squad back. Hartman kept waving. His shoulders burned. His arm felt like it belonged to someone else. The Catalina's circle passed overhead again, lower this time. The silhouettes in its windows were just dark enough that he could not see individual faces, just the collective gaze of an enemy he had fought for years, and now asked for mercy. They have not fired again, Schneider said quietly from the hatch. If they wanted us dead, we would be gone already. Or they are waiting for us to test the limits of their patience, Emler shot back. But even he did not sound convinced. Inside the boat, the pressure was rising in a different way. Men clustered in tight spaces, sweating despite the cool sea air, breathing in each other's fear. In the forward torpedo room, a machinist named Weber whispered, "The captain has lost his nerve. He will hand us over." "Shut your mouth," came the answer from a petty officer. "He is keeping you alive. That is more than command has bothered doing lately." In the mess, someone said, "Better American prison than Russian." That got a quiet chorus of bitter, reluctant agreement. In the control room, a younger sailor stared at the depth gauges that stubbornly stayed at 0. "Feels wrong, hearing the alarm and not going under?" His superior shrugged. "Everything feels wrong now." Back on the tower, Emler's mask of outrage cracked just enough to let doubt bleed through. "If they land and board us, we are prisoners," he said. "If they try to force us toward a port, we may still—" Hartman cut him off with a sharp gesture of the flag. "We are not in a position to negotiate conditions. For now, we do one thing only. We do not give that man any reason to doubt that we mean surrender." "Do you?" Miller asked, the question slipping out like something too heavy to hold. Hartman looked down at him. For the first time, his eyes were not just hard or tired. They were something else, stripped. "I mean that I am not burying 50 men to protect a regime that has already abandoned us," he said. "If there is a chance to live, I will take it. If that makes me a coward in some admiral's memoirs, so be it." "You once told us there is no surrender on this boat," Emler said. "I told you what I needed to, so you would go back to sea," Hartman replied. "I was wrong then. I am correcting that now." The words hit Emler harder than any slap. Authority admitting doubt, certainty crumbling. It shook the one thing he had been clinging to, the idea that someone above him still knew exactly what to do. On the Catalina, the debate took a different shape. "So we just keep scaring them for 3 hours?" Billy asked. "What if they change their minds?" "Then we remind them why that is a bad idea," Ramirez said. "We keep them feeling small. Think of it this way," Green added. "We are the world's loudest probation officer. They step out of line, we put them flat." Thompson listened to all of it, without taking his eyes off the submarine. We do more than scare them, he said finally. We communicate. To who? Collins asked. They are the enemy. We cannot just... To everyone on that deck who is not sure whether that flag is worth trusting, Thompson said. You see the guy waving it? That is a decision that is going to get him killed or keep him alive, either from his own side or from ours. Men like that do not stand alone for long. Not if they think no one believes them. You are going to talk to them, Ramirez said. We cannot land. We cannot board. But we can make it clear that we see that flag and we respect it, as long as they stick to it. He pressed the transmit switch on the intercom instead of the radio for a moment. Billy, listen up. I am going to make a low, slow pass parallel to them. You keep those guns pointed just away from their tower, not at it. Make it obvious. We are saying, we can kill you. We are choosing not to. Your move. Understood. Tom, Thompson said, switching to the external transmitter. Set to broadcast on general maritime frequency. They may not answer, but I want our voice in their heads. German or English? Green asked. English is enough, Thompson said. Tone carries, even if words do not. He banked the Catalina, lining it up so the submarine slid along their right side, 100 yards off. Close enough to see expressions now. Close enough that the man with the white flag was no longer a speck, but a person, hair whipped by wind, jaw clenched. Thompson clicked his mic. German submarine on the surface, he said, voice steady, almost formal. This is United States Navy patrol aircraft. We acknowledge your signal. Maintain current course and speed. Do not man your guns. Do not attempt to dive. Surface vessels are on their way. Comply, and your lives will be protected. Any hostile action will be answered immediately. His words vanished into the air between them, snatched by wind and engine noise. There was no guarantee anyone on that boat heard a single syllable. But tone carried. Authority carried. The deliberate lack of immediate violence carried. On U-977, Hartman did not catch every word, but he heard enough. United States Navy. Signal. Do not man your guns. Surface vessels. Lives will be protected. He let out a breath. He had not known he was holding. They mean to take us, he said. Or shoot us when the destroyer comes, Emmeller shot back. Then we will cross that deck when we are standing on it, Hartman replied. For now, no one touches the guns. No one moves toward the hatches unless ordered. Becker called up. Engineering stands ready for whatever madness comes next, Captain. Madness is already here, Hartman said, so low Becker could not be sure he had heard correctly. Below decks, rumors had outrun facts. Some men thought they were already prisoners. Others thought this was some trick to lure out another U-boat lurking nearby. One man quietly pulled a pistol from his locker and tucked it into his waistband, just in case. After 20 minutes of circling, tension found its breaking point. It happened near the aft deck, away from the tower. A knot of younger sailors, their faces pinched and eyes darting, huddled close. One of them, Schmidt, from Bavaria, barely 19, spoke through clenched teeth. We cannot let them take us, he said. You know what they do to U-boat crews, to Germans. They will hang us as pirates. Better to go down fighting. Shut up, his older mate barked. Why? Schmidt shot back. For this? He jerked his head toward the white flag. He betrays the Reich, and we just nod and die in some camp, years from now. Another voice joined in, low and hard. Obersteuermann Krantz, an older petty officer, whose faith in victory had rotted into something more poisonous. He is right about one thing. There is still powder in the magazines, torpedoes in the tubes. If we are to die, at least let it be with some dignity. And what do you suggest? The older mate demanded. Kranz's gaze flicked toward the tower, where Hartman still stood, arm heavy, but flag steady. There are ways to change command at sea. The words slid through the group like a cold current. You are talking about mutiny, someone whispered. I am talking about not going meekly into a cage, Kranz replied. The captain is thinking about his family in Kiel. I am thinking about my brother in Dresden, buried under American bombs. Do you think I will surrender to the people who did that? His hand drifted to the wrench at his belt, then lower, toward the knife at his boot. Becker's voice, urgent now, cut across the deck. Captain, aft deck. Hartman turned in time to see Kranz start forward, eyes fixed not on the sky, but on him. The distance between them was not much, 10 meters of slick steel, but it was enough time for a choice. On the Catalina, Billy saw the sudden shift in body language below. Men bunching, one breaking from the group, something in his hand, glinting. Lieutenant, there is movement aft, he called. Looks wrong. One guy looks like he's going for the tower. Maybe a weapon. Thompson's stomach tightened. Guns ready. Do not fire unless he heads for the flak, or someone starts shooting. Last thing we need is to be the ones who start the massacre. On U-977, Kranz strode forward. Hartman met him halfway, stepping down from the tower, flag still in hand. Stay where you are, Kranz, Hartman said, voice low but edged like the sea in winter. You are giving us to the Americans, Kranz said. He did not shout. He did not need to. Men were listening anyway. You watched a German sailor die last night for refusing to sail. Now you refuse to fight. How are you any different? I am trying to keep you alive, Hartman replied. Kranz's lip curled. Alive to what? To sit in a cage and be paraded in front of cameras as defeated U-boat men? To stand in some courtroom while they read out what beasts we are? I would rather sink with the boat than kneel on their deck. Meller watched, torn. This was the conflict he had been feeling made flesh. Duty to command versus duty to men. Pride versus survival. We will not sink this boat out of wounded pride, Hartman said. Not on my watch. Kranz took another step, the knife now clearly visible in his hand. Then maybe it should be someone else's watch. The deck crew tensed as one. No one moved. No one wanted to be the first to turn this into something that could not be undone. Becker stepped forward from the side, not toward Kranz, but at an angle, putting himself within arm's reach of both men. Kranz, he said quietly, put the knife away. There are 50 pairs of eyes on you and one very eager American up there just waiting for an excuse. They will shoot us anyway, Kranz said. Not yet, Becker answered. Right now, we are still men they might treat as prisoners. You draw blood on this deck, especially the captain's, and we become something else in their eyes. Do you want to give them that story to tell? The words hit harder than Hartman's arguments had. For all his rage, Kranz still cared what the enemy thought of him. Hatred was a relationship, even if he would never admit it. Hartman took a slow, visible breath. He let the flag in his hand drop just enough that it hung still, not waving, not signaling panic. Look up, Kranz, he said. Really look. Kranz's eyes flicked to the sky. The Catalina circled, guns pointed, engines droning. A blunt, ugly symbol of a power Kranz could not stab with a knife. You see that plane? Hartman went on. That is not a firing squad against a wall. That is not a Russian tank in your street. That is a machine with men in it who chose not to kill us when they could have. That is a chance. A bad one, maybe. But a chance. Kranz's fist clenched around the knife handle. His knuckles went white. His jaw muscles jumped. If you take that chance away from my men, Hartman said, if you draw that blood and turn this deck red, then you are not choosing honor. You are choosing their deaths, not yours, theirs, including the boys who never even got to fire a torpedo. Behind him, one of the youngest sailors swallowed hard. Kranz's gaze flicked to him, the freckles, the acne, the tremor. Something shifted. Slowly, like metal bending under sustained pressure instead of snapping, Kranz lowered the knife. I will not go into captivity smiling, he said. I am not asking you to smile, Hartman replied. I am asking you to stand. That is all. Kranz slid the knife back into his boot. He turned away sharply, the motion almost a spasm, and stalked back toward the aft hatch. Becker exhaled, a sound between a sigh and a curse. We just survived 2 executions in 2 days, he muttered. One by our own, one almost by our own. From above, Billy watched the knife disappear. Tension on deck easing, he reported. Whatever that was, looks like their captain won. Thompson did not relax. Keep watching. Fear makes people do stupid things in waves. Green's headset crackled. Ascension again. Destroyer reports 2.5 hours out at current speed. They want updates every 15 minutes. They also say, and I quote, maintain psychological pressure. Translation, Collins said. Keep scaring them. We are not just scaring them, Thompson said quietly. We are preventing them from tearing themselves apart before help even gets here. Ramirez glanced at him. You think that captain is holding them together? I think there is a man on that tower, Thompson said, who just did the hardest thing anyone in this war can do. He chose to live in front of his men. And he has to keep choosing it every minute until that destroyer shows up. That is not nothing. Billy shifted in his seat, suddenly aware that his finger on the trigger could erase that choice in half a heartbeat if something went wrong. Time stretched. The Catalina circled. The U-boat held course, stubbornly on the surface. The white flag, now tied to the periscope standard, fluttered weakly, a constant, embarrassing, life-saving signal. Inside U-977, the initial shock of surrender settled into a heavy, complicated quiet. Some men stared at the deck, ashamed. Some stared at the ceiling, relieved. Some simply stared at nothing, too tired to have an opinion. Emala remained on the tower, eyes flicking between the plane, the horizon, and his captain. You know this will follow us forever, he said eventually. If there is a forever for us to be followed into, Hartman replied, I will take it. You were the one who told me the war was not over until we stepped off this boat or it went to the bottom. Hartman looked at the flag. I still believe that. The difference is, I am trying to make sure we step off. 2 chips of news filtered down with the next scratchy radio intercepts. 1, that Berlin was almost certainly fallen. 2, that somewhere, sometime soon, the word surrender would be spoken officially into microphones and carved into treaties. On that strip of ocean, above that one steel hull, it had already been spoken in silence. Hours later, when the first smudge of gray appeared on the horizon, the destroyer, plowing toward them, both crews felt it before they saw it. On the Catalina, Collins called it out. We have company, bearing 310, closing fast. That will be our ride's ride. "Time to hand over the leash," Ramirez said. On U-977, Hartman watched the ship grow, big, armed, flying the flag of a country he had never seen except on maps and bombing raids. "Here it is," Becker said quietly. "No going back now." "There was no going back last night," Hartman replied. "This is just the part where everyone finds out." He straightened his coat, wiped salt from his face with the back of his sleeve, and tightened his grip on the railing. "Form up on deck," he shouted. "All hands not required below, topside, lined along the rails. Hands visible. No weapons. You will stand straight. You will not cower. Whatever happens next, you face it on your feet." As men climbed out, blinking in the harsh light, the Catalina made one last circle overhead, like a witness staying just long enough to see the handover. The destroyer cut through the swells, its guns trained but silent, its crew lining the rails to stare back at the men who had spent years trying to kill them. On one side, a captain who had just humbled himself before an enemy to save his crew. On the other, a pilot who had just bluffed with an empty hand and watched an enemy trust that lie enough to raise a flag. Their eyes met across distance, steel, and air, even if neither could make out the other's face. The white cloth still fluttered between them, no longer just a signal of surrender, but the thin, fragile line separating massacre from the possibility of something else. The destroyer's shadow fell over U-977 like a moving cliff. Its gray hull loomed high above the U-boat, water foaming white at the bow as the engines rumbled deep and steady. Men in khaki and blue crowded the rails, rifles slung, helmets catching the pale light. They stared down at the submarine crew as if looking at ghosts that had somehow stayed alive too long. On U-977's deck, Hartman stood at the forward rail, back straight, cap on, coat buttoned despite the damp heat. The white flag fluttered from the periscope standard behind him, an accusation and a lifeline. "Hands where they can see them," he said without turning. "No sudden movements. No talking unless spoken to. You will behave like sailors, not criminals. Understood?" A ragged chorus of, "Yes, Herr Kalau," answered him. Some voices were steady. Some shook. A bullhorn crackled from the destroyer's bridge. An American voice, amplified and distorted, boomed across the water. "German submarine. This is United States Navy warship. You are to remain stopped. All personnel topside will keep their hands visible at all times. You will follow all instructions exactly. Any hostile act will be met with immediate force." Hartman raised his voice so it would carry back. "This is Captain Lieutenant Werner Hartman, commanding officer of U-977. We will comply." Even speaking those words left a metallic taste in his mouth. Commanding officer of U-977. In a few minutes, that phrase would belong to his past, not his present. Ropes flew across the gap. Fenders thudded between hulls. Sailors on both sides worked the lines with professional focus, years of training overriding the strangeness of the moment. On the destroyer, Lieutenant Jack Thompson leaned against the rail just aft of the bridge, eyes locked on the submarine he had been circling for hours. The Catalina sat far behind them now on the water, engines cooling, crew watching the transfer like men who knew they were witnessing something very few would ever believe without photographs. "They look smaller up close," Billy said quietly beside him. "The Germans, I mean." "They are just men," Thompson answered. "They were always just men. Distance is what makes monsters." Ramirez nodded toward the U-boat. "See the one at the front? That has to be their skipper." Hartman was unmistakable even at this range. the way he held himself, the way the men around him seemed to orient unconsciously toward his position. A center of gravity in a field of frayed nerves. A boarding party assembled on the destroyer's deck. Armed guards, an interpreter with a thick notebook, a medical corpsman with a Red Cross band on his sleeve. A junior officer checked his sidearm twice, as if expecting the steel in his holster to change its mind. "Lieutenant Thompson." The destroyer's captain, Commander Davis, called him over. "You are on this circus. You might as well see it through." Thompson joined him at the rail. "Sir." Davis kept his binoculars up. "Your empty bird managed to bag us a live U-boat, Lieutenant. That is one for the war stories." "I got lucky," Thompson said. "No," Davis replied without looking at him. "You kept your head. They lost theirs first. That is not luck. That is training and nerve. Do not downplay it. Not today." He lowered the glasses, studying Hartman's profile. Look at that man. He knows this is the end of his war, one way or another. Down on the U-boat, a rope ladder slapped against the hull. An American petty officer shouted instructions in slow, clear English, his words backed by the unmistakable authority of rifles pointed down at the deck. "You will come up one at a time," he called. "No bags, no weapons. Hands first." Hartman glanced along his rail of men. "Senior petty officers first," he said. "Then the rest by compartments. You will go calmly. No pushing. No arguing. Anyone who panics will make it worse for everyone." He turned to Becker. "Chief, you stay until last with me. Keep the engines secured. I do not want any nervous American thinking we are about to bolt." "Yes, Captain," Becker said. He hesitated, then gripped Hartman's forearm briefly. "Whatever happens next, at least we are not rusting at the bottom. That is something." "It is more than I expected this morning," Hartman admitted. The first men climbed. Hands on rungs, boots searching for the next foothold, eyes flicking up to the forest of foreign faces above. Each step took them further from the boat that had been home, and coffined both. On the destroyer's deck, sailors frisked them quickly, efficiently. Knives, watches, even pens were taken and dropped into labeled sacks. A corpsman checked for obvious wounds, pointed them toward a corner of the deck where a growing knot of prisoners formed, guarded by Marines who looked both tense and morbidly curious. Billy watched as one young German, no older than he was, stumbled at the top of the ladder and nearly fell. A big American sailor reached out instinctively, grabbed his arm, and steadied him before stepping back, rifle barrel still angled down. "Thank you," the German muttered, accent thick but words clear. The American pretended not to hear. His ears, however, went slightly red. "You all right?" Ramirez asked Billy quietly. "Yeah," Billy said. I thought they would look more like the posters." "What, square-jawed devils?" Ramirez snorted. "Posters lie. Men do not have time." Hartman climbed when most of his crew were already aboard. Becker went just before him, slow but steady. When Hartman's boots touched the destroyer's deck, a dozen rifles shifted almost imperceptibly. He raised his hands, fingers spread. The steel under his soles felt different, higher, broader, stable in a way his own boat had never been. The petty officer in charge stepped forward, translator hovering nearby. "Name and rank," the American said. "Hartman, Captain Lieutenant, Commanding Officer, U-977. The translator repeated it in accented German. Hartman answered without waiting. "I speak enough English," he said. "Good," the petty officer replied. "You and your men are now prisoners of war of the United States Navy. You will be treated in accordance with the Geneva Convention. provided you follow all lawful orders and do not attempt escape or resistance. Do you understand?" "I understand," Hartman said. He hesitated a fraction of a second. "My crew will cooperate." The petty officer nodded. "Our captain will speak with you shortly. For now, you will stand with your men." Hartman moved to where his crew was gathered. Faces turned toward him. Some held anger. Some held relief that bordered on gratitude. Some were simply numb. Emmeller stepped closer. "So this is it. This is it," Hartman said. "We are the first to do this," Emmeller said quietly. "A U-boat surrendering to a plane, to a flag on a tower. There will be stories." "There are always stories," Hartman replied. "Make sure the ones they tell about you are not written in panic." Up near the bridge, Davis and Thompson approached the cluster of prisoners. The crowd of American sailors parted just enough to let them through. "That one," Davis said under his breath, nodding toward Hartman. "Let us meet the man who decided he likes American prisons more than German graves." They stopped in front of him. For a moment, no one spoke. The roll of the ship, the creak of lines, and the slap of waves against steel filled the gap. "Commander Davis, United States Navy," the destroyer's captain said finally. "This is Lieutenant Thompson, the pilot who found you." Hartman absorbed that. His gaze shifted to Thompson, taking in the flight jacket, the lines of exhaustion at the corners of the eyes, the set of the jaw. "You were very convincing," Hartman said in English. "Your attack run was textbook." Thompson almost smiled. "Thank you. It was also empty." Hartman blinked once. "Empty. No bombs, no depth charges," Thompson said. "Just fuel, machine guns, and bad ideas." A few of the nearby Americans smirked. Some of the Germans stiffened, realizing in that instant how thin the thread had been that morning. Emmeller's face went pale. "Empty," he repeated in German, almost to himself. Hartman registered the words, then let out a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a groan. "So, I surrendered my boat to a bluff." "You surrendered your boat to the belief that you were about to die," Thompson said. "You were not wrong about the danger. One good hit from your flak, and my story ends in the water." Hartman studied him. "Why did you not simply radio for a ship and stay out of range? Why take the risk?" "Because we have been flying over empty water for a long time," Thompson said. "Because the last time I saw one of your boats, I left men in the water I could not pick up. Because command expects results, and the ocean does not cooperate. Take your pick." Davis cut in before the strange, brittle honesty could go further. "Whatever his reasons, you are alive. That is what matters now. Formalities can wait until you are processed." He turned to Thompson. "Your part in this is done, Lieutenant. Once we have them secured, you and your crew will get some rack time. Then you can start writing the report that nobody is going to believe without 3 signatures." "Yes, sir," Thompson said. He lingered a half-second longer, meeting Hartman's eyes again. There was no triumph there, no gloating, just the tired recognition of someone who had sat at a different table in the same rigged game. "We both played with what we had," Thompson said quietly. "You had a flag. I had an empty plane. Looks like this time that was enough." Hartman nodded once. "Until the next war, Lieutenant." "Let us both hope there is not one," Thompson answered. He stepped back, leaving the Germans to the guards and the paperwork. Hours later, as the destroyer cut through the Atlantic toward a port that smelled of diesel, sweat, and victory parades, Thompson lay in his bunk in a cramped officer's cabin. The ship's hum felt different from the Catalina's vibration, deeper, more constant. It made his thoughts buzz. Billy lay in the rack above, eyes open in the dim light. "You asleep, Jack?" "No." "Do you think they hate us?" Billy asked. "The Germans." "Some of them," Thompson said. "Some of them probably hate the man who waved that flag more than us." "Would you have done it?" Billy asked. "If you were him? If you were the one on that tower?" Thompson stared at the bottom of the bunk above him. The memory of the oil slick came back again. Of binoculars filled with a drowning man he could not save because orders and fuel and policy said no. "I would like to think I would have," he said slowly. "But you never know until it is your men on the line." Billy was silent for a while. He looked, I do not know, not like the villain in the newsreels. "Because he is not," Thompson said. "He is a man who made choices he thought were right, then lived long enough to see the world change its mind about them. On the other side of steel and sea, in a makeshift holding area below decks, Hartman sat on a bench, bolted to the bulkhead. His wrists were free for now. The guards at the door watched, rifles ready, but not pointed. His crew clustered along the benches and on the floor. Some slept, bodies finally giving in. Some whispered. Some stared at nothing. Emmeler sat opposite him, elbows on knees, head in his hands. "Empty," Emmeler said suddenly, looking up. "It was all for nothing. The plane was empty." "It was not for nothing," Hartman said. "We surrendered to a lie." "We surrendered to the possibility that the lie was true," Hartman replied. "If we had called it, we might all be dead. That is the game we have been playing since this started. Sometimes you bluff, sometimes you fold, sometimes you throw your cards away and walk out if they let you." Emmeler's mouth twisted. "You sound like an American now." "I sound like a man who has run out of good metaphors for drowning," Hartman said. He leaned back against the cool metal, closed his eyes for a moment. Sophie's face rose in the darkness behind his lids. Anna's, a street not yet cratered, a house not yet flattened. "I will be there," he whispered, though he did not know when or how. "Even if I arrive as a different man than the one who left." Days turned into weeks, interrogations, forms, camps fenced with wire that let you see the world but not touch it. Food that was bland but regular. Confusion about where Berlin had fallen, when exactly the war had ended, which flags were now considered enemies and which allies. News seeped in like slow water. Hitler dead. Dienitz captured. The Reichsgov gone. Trials being prepared. Words like capitulation and unconditional and reconstruction. The story of U-977's surrender did not make front-page headlines. There were bigger stories, cities leveled, millions displaced, nations sitting in ruins. A single submarine raising a white flag to an empty-bellied biplane was a curiosity, a footnote for naval analysts and barroom storytellers. For the men who had been there, it was the moment the war flipped from noise to echo. Years later, in a hall in a coastal American town, a veterans association put on a modest event. Folding chairs, coffee in big metal urns, flags on the walls, an honor roll of names read out in a voice that shook now and then. On one side of the room, a table held memorabilia from the South Atlantic Patrol squadrons. A faded squadron patch, a model of a Catalina, a black and white photo of a flying boat circling above a surfaced submarine, white flag visible if you knew where to squint. Jack Thompson, hair gone thinner and grayer, stood in front of it, one hand resting on the glass of the frame. His grandchildren had grown tired and wandered off to the cookie table. "They said you bluffed a U-boat into surrendering," a voice with a careful German accent said behind him. "I never saw the paperwork, but the story traveled far." Thompson turned. A man in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, stood there. Neat civilian clothes, straight back despite the years, eyes that had seen too much and still missed nothing. "Werner Hartmann," the man said, extending a hand. "Former Kapitänleutnant, U-977. Thompson took it. The grip was firm, familiar. "Jack Thompson, Lieutenant once, Catalina pilot." They shook hands for the first time after a lifetime of having shaped each other's dreams and nightmares. "I did not expect you to come," Thompson said. "I did not expect to be invited," Hartmann replied. "But the local historian thought it would make a good panel." "Two old men talking about a day when they were younger and stupider," Thompson said. "People eat that up." They stood for a moment, side by side, looking at the faded photograph. "I had nothing under my wings that day," Thompson said. "We were as dangerous as a photographer." "You had more than you think," Hartmann replied. "You had my belief. And you had a flag," Thompson said. Hartmann nodded once, and 50 men watching me, wondering if the next sound they heard would be bombs or my voice. "Do you regret it?" Thompson asked. "The flag." Hartmann considered the question carefully. "I regret many things about that war," he said slowly. "Orders I followed. Orders I did not question. Things I convinced myself were necessary. That flag is not one of them." Thompson looked at him. "Me neither. About the bluff, I mean. If it had gone wrong, we would not be having this conversation," Hartmann said, "which would have spared us both some awkward silences." They both almost smiled. "In the end," Hartmann went on, "what saved us was not the guns or the steel. It was one simple fact. You were afraid enough of what might be under the surface to pretend you were stronger than you were. I was afraid enough of what might be in the sky to pretend I was weaker than I wanted to be. And between those two pretends," Thompson said quietly, "nobody died." "For once," Hartmann agreed. They stood in silence a little longer, two old enemies sharing the only thing that truly bound them. The knowledge of how close one morning in 1945 had come to vanishing into another unmarked patch of cold Atlantic water. On the wall, the photograph showed the Catalina and the U-boat locked in their strange, fragile orbit. A white scrap of cloth on one, empty bomb racks on the other. Between them, in a space no camera could capture, hung the thin, invisible line where war ended, not with an explosion, but with a bluff believed, and a flag raised.